Hi everyone, I am CS Punshi, Indirect Tax Expert at ClearTax, and today we all gathered here to learn about the top reasons of GST notices for companies and how we can avoid them. But before we even start our today's session, I just want to check if you all are able to hear me or not. So if you are able to hear me, just say hi on the chat box. Great. So it seems like everyone is able to hear me. With this, we'll just start our today's session, which is on top reason of GST notices for the company and how we can avoid them. So here, whenever we think about life, so what exactly we are going to discuss in today's session is like what are the top reason why people have started receiving the notices, what was the main reason of receiving that notices, what to do in case we have received these notices, and also how we can avoid such kind of notices in future. So we are going to discuss about all of this thing. And along with that, we'll also understand how ClearText can help you with avoiding and replying to these notices. Now, if you first ask me what exactly this notices means under GST, right? So it's a kind of a communication. It's a way how the assessing officer, the government portal, even the GST portal itself, right? They can communicate with the taxpayer that there is some problem with what they have filed or what there is a shortage, right? A very simple example I will give you that assume that there is a person who was required to file their return, let's say who are required to file their GST1 and GSTR-3B every month, right? But they have not filed their return. So in that particular case, you will see that many times you always keep on receiving a reminder. So they are reminder that they say that please file your GST1 or GSTR-3B on time. If you have already filed, you ignore it. So that's a kind of just a reminder. It's not a notice. But you will also see that there is a show cause notice which has been issued. So there the department clearly mentioned if you don't file your 1 and 3B on time in that particular case, because the date is already lapsed, right? And if you don't file your 1 and 3B on time, then they are going to cancel your registration itself. So that is a kind of a notice which they issue. And if you don't reply to that particular issue, then whatever the consequences we have for that, that gets applied, right? So there could be some penal interest, and an example I gave there, they will just cancel your registration. So there are other things to it. Now if you ask me like what are the common reason why we see that there is a notice being issued by the department. So something that today most of our portals, right, different portals are interlinked with each other. Now, if I just look into our GST itself, I'm not even going to the income tax portal. I'm not going to even the IceGate portal. I'm not going to maybe the custom portal, right? I'm just talking about the GST portal itself. So in the GST portal, we know that whenever I file my GST1, right, same information I also have to file in my 3B. So whatever the liability on my outward supply, I have to report in my GSTR1, and accordingly, the same liability has to be reported in my GSTR3B, right? And in GSTR3B, that's the form where I actually go ahead and pay the taxes to the government. So whenever there is a discrepancy, because government anyhow the GST portal is made in a way that they get this kinds of a report when there are discrepancies between different products or different parts of the firm itself. So whenever they see that there is a discrepancies between what was reported in GST1 and what was paid in GST3B, they raise a notice there. Why? Obviously it is upfront from that, right? So if I'm saying that I have to pay 1 lakh as a liability, but I have just reported 80,000 in my GST3B, then there is a problem there, right? So department will ask you that why there's a difference of 20,000 and you should actually pay 20,000 along with the interest. So the one common reason is whenever there's a discrepancy between 1 and GSTR3B. So in that particular case, there you will always raise the notice because it's upfront, right? So from the upfront, they can say that there's a discrepancy and you have to correct it. Now, the second common reason, if you would have seen, is today we get this GSTR-2B. What exactly is this 2B? Whenever my supplier, they file their GSTR-1 return, right? So whenever they file their GSTR-1, all this information gets populated in my GSTR-2B as a customer, right? So when I see my 2B basis that, I go ahead and claim the ITC in my GSTR-3B. So if as per my GSTR-2B, I was eligible to claim 1 lakh as an ITC, but I am claiming let's say 1,20,000 ITC, there's a discrepancy between the ITC which is claimed. and obviously department is not going to allow you to claim extra amount, right? Ultimately they would say, okay, whatever I have received from the supply in the form of the taxes, that is the amount you should be allowed to claim. You should not claim extra, right? It's simple, right? Whatever they have received, they will only give that as a credit to you. They're not going to give you more credit over there. So here, this is again the upfront thing. Whenever there is a difference between the ITC, which is as per your GSTR-2B, and the ITC which you have claimed in GSTR-3B. So if there is a discrepancy between these two, then this is the another reason why the department raises you the notice. Right, so this was the second reason. We'll also talk about how you can avoid that, and if you can't avoid that, that what are the things which you should keep in your mind while you're filing your GST return, so that at least even when you receive this communication, whenever you receive these notices, you are in a condition where you can actually give the documentation very frequently to the users, right, through the assessing officer. You don't have to worry about that, okay, they have raised this notice, what I have to do I have to now keep on preparing all the documentation and all, so that you are not actually stuck with all this thing. So we'll discuss on that part too. Now the another major reason, so we just talk about there's a mismatch between 1 and 3B. We said there's a mismatch between your 3B and the 2B. Similarly, when you're delaying in filing, right, whenever you are dealing in filing your GSTR-1 or GSTR-3B, in that particular case again, right, so in that particular case, the department, what they do, they again raise the notice to you. Now if you understand, right, from the very normal thing, wherever the assessing officers see that there is an impact on the revenue, right, they can collect more revenue, they can get some interest, they can get some late fees and all that. In such case, they're going to raise the notice. But wherever is the vice versa case, let me give you few example, right? Think about the case that you have claimed some ITC of, let's say, 20,000 in your GSTR 3B, whereas as per 2B there is an ITC available of 1 lakh rupees. You will never see that there's a notice being issued because there's no revenue loss to the government, right? But if it's a vice versa case, definitely you're going to receive the notice. So whatever is favorable to the revenue, there you will see that you are actually receiving the notices, right? Now whenever I'm saying that there is a delay in filing the GSTR-1 and the GSTR-3B, in that particular case again you will see that there will be some notices being issued to you, and the side impact of that would be, or the side effect of that would be, that they will say if you don't file on time, we'll cancel your GST number itself, or we'll suspend your GST number. And if they suspend your GST number, the bigger problem comes in, you will not be able to run your business as smoothly as you can in general. Then whenever they see the inconsistency between what was filed in GST1 and what was there in the e-way bill portal, right? If you ask me, see, in general, first question obviously will come in your mind, and let me ask you this question from all of you. Today, if you look into the e-way bill, right, whatever the e-way bill we create today and whatever we report in GST1, what do you think? Will there be any differences or not? Whether there will be any differences between GSTR-1 and e-way bill. So you can just reply on the chat box. Today, if I just ask you a very simple question, would there be any differences between GSTR-1 and the e-way bill or not? So you can just reply on the chat box. I could see Vipin says yes. Vijay Kantu says yes. Manjeet says yes. So they says that yes, there would be difference. Jignesh says yes, there would be difference. Ashish Aman says yes, there would be difference. And which is the right answer also, right? Obviously, there would be differences between what is filed in GST1 and what actually has been shown in the e-way bill. And why would there be even difference? I will give you a few examples. In GST1, we report all of our outward tax liability, right? All the supplies in respect will, I would say, all the outward supply, right? That is what we show in GST1. It could be the outward supply because could be because of the services. This outward supply could be because of the goods also, right? Whereas when I look into my e-way bill we create only in respect of movements of good. Obviously, I'm not going to create the e-way bill in respect of the services and all, but that will be reported in my GSTR1. But if you ask me in general, right, if there is some extra thing reported in GSTR1 and less thing reported in e-way bill, government will be still okay. The reason why, because ultimately all this information which gets reflected in your GSTR1 goes and sit in your GSTR3B, and the liability you actually pay in your GSTR3B. But if it's a vice versa case, where you have created lot of e-way bill, but this information is not coming in your GSTR-1, the government are more worried about that. But now question is, are there normal genuine cases where you would have generated e-way bill but the same was not reported in GSTR-1? The again answer would be yes, there are certain scenarios. Let me give you a few examples. Today, let's say I'm sending my goods from one branch to another branch within the same GSTN, right? I'm into a business. I have, let's say I'm registered in the state of Karnataka. I have one branch in, let's say in HSR, another branch is in Whitefield. I want to transfer these goods from one place to another. Since the GST number is same, I'm going to generate a delivery challenge and will transfer these goods from one location to another. But this transaction I'm not going to report in my GSTR-1, right? So this is one example, right? So where I can say that, hey, okay, I know that there is an e-way bill which is being generated, but I'm not going to report in GST1 because here there is no supply at all. It is just a movement of goods. That was the main reason I have generated e-way bill, right? So this is few example, and there could be another example. Like I could see Manjeet is giving me one example is job work chala. True. Whenever I'm sending the goods to a job worker, right, in that particular case also I don't have to pay GST at that time. In that case, again, on the basis of delivery challan, I move these goods from one location to another. Or maybe there could be a second example. I think I could see from Aman who's saying when we are sending the goods on the approval basis. So yeah, that could be another thing. I could see the example from Vipin who says if we supply the goods less than 50K, right? So whenever I'm supplying the goods with a value less than 50K, again, this e-way bill generation is optional in nature. It's on me if I want to generate it or not. So I can always skip that, right? So in that particular case, I don't even have to generate the e-way bill. So these are certain scenarios. But now if you ask me, now I will talk about practicality. So this is what we understood. Now let's think from the assessing officer. First question, today are they actually raising the notices when there is a mismatch between the e-way bill and the GST1? I would say yes. I myself have seen lot of notices being issued whenever there is a discrepancy between the e-way bill and GST1. So which means, can I avoid that? As we simply said, right? And I could see there is also one comment from Abhinav who says we actually received show cause note in Tamil Nadu in April 2022, and that's a fair thing. And actually, I have myself have seen a lot of notices being issued whenever there's a discrepancies between this e-way bill and the GST1 data. So now question is, can I avoid this notice? Let you only answer this. Can I avoid this notice or not whenever there's a discrepancies between GSTR-1 and the e-way bill data? Maybe you can reply on the chat box. So today, whenever there's a discrepancy between GSTR-1 and the e-way bill, can I avoid that? So if you now ask me, right, I would say I cannot avoid that. Why I can't avoid it? Because I know that there would be discrepancies. I will definitely receive the communication over here, but I have no option to avoid that. The reason is because I know I cannot make sure that there is no discrepancy. Obviously, there would be discrepancy, and we gave a lot of examples over there. But can we reply on time and make sure that our time is not wasted the time the notice is being received by the department? And we are ready. We know that there's a discrepancy, but we are ready to tell them, ki, hey, I know that there's a difference between this, and this is the reason for this. And accordingly, I don't have to worry about that. Even if I'm receiving notice, see, notice does not mean that if I have received that, I have to pay a lot of penalty, I have to pay a lot of demand by the department. That's not the case, right? It is really very okay even when you are receiving a notice. The important part, how are you replying to that notice? That is the most important part. And you yourself can always reply to the notice. See, today I would say that we already have this GSTN portal which is online. We receive all the notices also online. We can also reply to these notices online. And this is a very normal case when we see this discrepancy if we are already ready. And how we can reply it, right? See, when we run the reconciliation between GST1 and the e-way bill, right? When we run the reconciliation between GST1 and the e-way bill, we'll see that, okay, these are the mismatch. What we have to even look into it, there would be some outward transaction, there would be some inward transaction. We have to see as a supplier, right? So sometime I create the e-way bill, sometime maybe a transporter would have created the e-way bill, sometime maybe a customer would have created that e-way bill, right? Doesn't matter whether who is creating the e-way bill. What matters is who is the supplier. If you yourself is a supplier, you just look into, you just take out the report, take out all the e-way bill which is created in your name, just see that okay, now I know this are the all e-way bills which has been created. Now you just see who is the supplier here. If you yourself is a supplier, right, that becomes your outward supply, which is going to be reported in your GSTR-1 also. Match all this transaction with what is actually reported in GSTR-1, right? Here you should not look into the transaction where you yourself was a recipient, because obviously there would be a cases where the e-way bill has been generated in your name but you are not the supplier, because maybe there was a supplier who has sent the goods to you and that person has generated e-way bill. You are able to see that e-way bill also on your portal, but you know that will never be reported in GST1 because that's not your outward supply, right? So what you have to see, you just have to see if supplier GST and see whether supplier GST belongs to you or not. And if it belongs to you, in that particular case, you only match that transaction with your GST1. Once you match this transaction with your GST1, you would know, okay, now these are matched completely fine. There is a differences now. Obviously, there would be differences. But now for the differences, you see, okay, these are the delivery challan not to be reported because there is no supply. There could be the values are less than 50,000 not to be reported. This is a reason. This is in respect of the services. We have already reported extra things are coming in GST1, but e-way will not generated. So you have to know the reasons why there is a mismatch, so that now when you're doing this activity every month, right, whenever the department comes up with a notice, you don't have to worry. You have all documentation with you, you know the proper reasoning. You just say, hey department, I know that you have raised this, you take this. Because see, even after 2 years, whenever they are raising it, right, it becomes really very difficult. Then now you start tracking or keep a track of what happened like in the last 2 year. But it's very easy when you're doing it now itself, because now you everything is in fresh in your mind, right? So when everything is fresh in your mind, you can always do it. But if something you're going to look after like 2 years, you don't even remember that what happened that time. We would have done certain adjustments and all. Maybe there was a case that the e-way bill got expired, and we know that when e-way bill got expired, we would have generated another e-way bill just to make sure the goods moves on, right? So you have to keep the transition, keep a track of all this. But if you do that on monthly basis, that becomes more easy for you to reply to the department over here. So this is the another reason why the department actually raises a notice. Now, since I talk about this inconsistency declaration between GST1 and the e-way bill, let me ask you another very simple question. Whether there would be any mismatch between GSTR-1 and the 3B. Can I avoid this part? For e-way bill and the GSTR-1, we said that yes, we cannot avoid it, and there can be many normal reason, a practical reason that why there would be a discrepancy, and I can't avoid it. There would be discrepancy. I only have to respond to the department that yes, I know there's a discrepancy, but this is the reason. This is a genuine reason for that. But let me ask you a very simple question. Can I avoid the notice in respect of the mismatch between GSTR-1 and the 3B? You can reply on the chat box. So, can I avoid the notice in respect of the mismatch between GSTR-1 and 3B? I could see Abhinav answer from Abhinav, who said no mismatch should be there in GSTR-1 and 3B ideally. Aman says no. Manjeet says no. Okay. What about others? Maninkanta says no. Shiva Yogi says no. Aman says it can be in the case of RCM. Okay. What about others? All right. Bijoy says no. Okay. So now, if you ask me now, can I avoid the notice for 1 and 3B? I would say yes, you can avoid that notice. Because today, even department, see, I could see there was one example from Aman also. He said, what about the RCM? See, we know that there is an RCM liability also, but RCM liability is never reported in GSTR-1, but that is reported in GSTR-3B. But when is that particular liability is reported in 3B, that has a separate row altogether. We know that has to be reported in 3.1D. So even the department, whenever they are raising the notice because of the mismatch between GSTR-1 and 3B, they never considered that particular liability. So that liability altogether is a separate. So they will only consider that, okay, whatever the liability is coming because of your GSTR-1 and whatever the liability which is coming because of your table number 3.1 A, B, C or E, right? That liability or the turnover, even the turnover, they check whatever the turnover you have shown or the taxable value you have shown in 3B and the 1, are they matching or not? If they're not matching, then they're going to raise the notice over there, right? So if you ask me, question very simple: are there a genuine case when there would be a discrepancy between this? Answer: obviously there is one reason. I will even talk about that one reason why there will be difference between that. So let remove that one reason. But in general, if you ask me whether there will be discrepancy between GSTR 1 and 3B, I would say no. There won't be any discrepancy between your GSTR 1 and the GSTR 3B. Every time whatever you have filed in your GSTR 1, the liability which you have shown in GSTR 1 will always match with the liability which you are going to report in your GSTR 3B. But there are actually not one, I would say two reasons when there can be a discrepancies, right? But again, in that two reasons also, right, department is not going to raise a notice to you. Now I will tell you what are the two reasons. See, if you, as I asked one simple question, can we avoid it? I would say yes. 99.9% we can always avoid that. But can there be any reason where there would be actually a discrepancy? Yes, there are two reasons when there will be a discrepancy. One reason is because of a credit note. Whenever you raise a credit note, right, in respect of the state when you don't have any sale on in that particular state, right? So if you have supplied to an unregistered person and in that particular state you don't have any sale, so that you can net it off, in that particular case you will always see that there is a credit note which is shown in your GSTR 1, but that credit note you're not able to adjust in your GSTR 3B. So there the liability which has been shown in 3B would obviously be more than the liability which you have shown in GSTR 1. So here you will always see a discrepancy between your GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. And the reason why? Because the government don't allow you to put the negative figures in GSTR 3B. So that's the main reason that why there's a discrepancy between your GSTR 1 and GSTR 3B. But again, my simple question: will department raise a notice because of this? The answer would be no. Why? Because anyhow the department got the extra money over there, right? There is no shortage there. You reported something, right, in GSTR 1, though you have paid extra to the government, there the department is not going to raise any notice because their revenue is not anyhow getting impacted. So when their revenue is not getting impacted, they're not going to even raise any notice over there. So even if there is a discrepancy, still you would not receive any notice there. The second reason I will tell you why there could be a discrepancy is, whenever you supply through an e-commerce operator. Now here I would say the discrepancy is not because of the liability being paid. This discrepancy is between the turnover being reported in GSTR 1 and the 3B. Now I will give you one simple trick. Whenever you're supplying through an e-commerce operator, right, I will give you and when I'm saying through an e-commerce operator, I'm talking about that e-commerce operator who are covered under section 9 subsection 5. A very simple example is restaurant services. Think about, I'm a Domino's and I want to file my GSTR 1 and I'm supplying through Swiggy or a Zomato is an e-commerce platform. When Swiggy and Zomato is an e-commerce platform, I'm a restaurant, I'm supplying through Swiggy and Zomato, and you ordered something. When you order something, we all understand that here the liability is on the Swiggy and Zomato. They have to pay the taxes to the government and not the Domino's, right? So in that particular case, there was a new section being introduced, which was table number 3.1.1. There, the Domino's Swiggy, they are going to report the liability and they will also show there's some turnover, which will not be included in their turnover. There was no problem from the Swiggy or Zomato angle because they are not going to show this information in their GSTR 1. Right? When they don't show that information in their GSTR 1, they will only pay the liability in their GSTR 3B, and anyhow government will also not consider 3.1.1 for the differences between GSTR 1 and 3B for the Swiggy and Zomato. But think from that e-commerce supplier. Now, when you think from the e-commerce supplier, obviously that's their turnover, right? So now when that is their turnover, the question is that information will be reflected in the 3.1.1B part, right? So there they will show that as a turnover, but when it comes to GSTR 1, under which section they're going to report that? If they report that under the nil rated exempted non-GST supplies, then it will also be ideally should go and sit in their table number 3.1C, right? There that information will come, but they have to remove that information from there and put in table number 3.1.B. So there they may see certain discrepancy, and this is one other reason when you may have some discrepancy. Depends on how you are going to report, how you're reporting the transaction GSTR-1. That is what matters while you see differences between the turnover being reported in GSTR-1 and the 3B. So this is something where you may see discrepancy, but if you would have correctly filed, if you do one thing, that if let's say in GSTR-1 you have reported a nil-rated exempted non-GST, just make sure that while filing 3B you have not added that it over here and added in table number 3.1.1b. If you had done in that way, then you will never see a discrepancy because of this reason too, right? So now my simple, I'm coming back to the same question. Can I avoid the notice between because of the mismatch between 1 and 3B? I would say yes, you can always avoid it. So that's again another important part, that always make sure every month you're doing a proper reconciliation between your GSTR-1 and the 3B, and make sure there is no liability underreported or overreported. If there is an overreported because of the credit note, you make sure that what was that month when you have actually adjusted that, because in a month when you have actually adjusted that, in that month you would see that there is an under liability or underreported liability in GSTR-1, or I would say something which you have paid in 3B is less compared to what was paid in your GSTR-1, right? So that month you may have some discrepancy, but you should again know why there was a discrepancy. So even if tomorrow you receive a notice because of that, because of unadjusted credit note, you should be in a condition to reply to the department, hey, that this is in relation to this month when I have paid extra to you, right? So this is the way you can always look into it. Now, a very important thing, and most of the time we receive the notice because of this, which is the difference between GSTR 3B and the 2B. Now let me come back to the same question. Can you avoid the notice because of the discrepancy between what ITC you have claimed in GSTR-3B and what is actually coming in your GSTR-2B? So can we do that? Can we avoid that notice? I could see the answer from Abhinav. Abhinav says, no, we can't avoid it. Vipin says, no, we can't avoid it. Vijay Kant says, no, we cannot avoid it. And Malko says, no. Ramamurthy says no. So in short, you all are saying that you cannot avoid it, and which is actually the right answer. Right? How can we avoid a notice between what is coming in 2B and the 3B? But let me understand from all of you, why? Why can't we avoid the notice between what is the difference between the 2B and the 3B? Why can't we even avoid that notice? Okay, so now, and actually everyone have said the right thing. You cannot avoid the notice between the discrepancies between 3B and the 2B. And I could see one answer from Marcos who is saying because of the timing difference. And it's the right thing. Because the timing difference you may always see. A very simple example, right? That there was some ITC which was coming in your GST2B, but you were not able to claim that ITC in that particular month since you had not received that goods and services. So when you have not received that goods and services, in that particular case, even if it was coming in 2B, you would have not claimed it, and you would have claimed that maybe in the subsequent month. So maybe in that subsequent month when you have claimed it, the ITC you have shown is more than what is even reflecting in 2B, but maybe in the previous month it was less. So right, so because of this timing differences, there can be a discrepancy between what is coming in 2B and the 3B. So it's always there that yes, here in such scenarios there would be discrepancy between 2B and 3B. I will give you a few more examples. See, even how the government or how we actually report that ITC, right? That is also another important part, that there can be discrepancies. Today, see, some people report that ITC is a net figure. I will tell you that when 2B, right? So when we look into the 2B, 2B gets the information from 2B gets auto-populated in your GSTR 3B. So when the information from your 2B gets auto-populated in your GSTR 3B, let me ask you a very simple question, another important question, because this is something which is very relevant here, and it is also relevant after we had this change in the month of August. So you know that from this August 2022 onwards, there is a change in the 3B. And now the government is trying to track that the ITC which you are claiming in table number 4A5 of GSTR 3B is actually matching with what is coming in your GSTR 2B. Plus, even if there was some ITC because of the timing differences, are you actually reversing that and putting that information 4D1? So this is really important, because here we all understand that when you are going to actually receive the notice from the department. So what is the that important point which we should know before even filing the GSTR 3B? So here I will give you, let me first ask you this question and then maybe I will reply on that part, like how we can avoid the notices here also. Because if you ask me, right, before August 2022, if you would have asked me the same question, I would have said no, you cannot avoid the notice between 2B and 3B. But now, if you ask me the same question, I would say yes, there are the ways when you can actually avoid the notice because of the discrepancies between 2B and the 3B, and which is from August 2020 onwards. But depending on how you are showing that ITC in your GSTR 3B. So, depending on that, only we can tell you if that can be avoided or not. Now, let me talk about that. Before, as I told you, right, the question is you had one invoice. Let's talk about a very simple case. You had received one invoice for with an ITC amount of 1 lakh rupees, right? Out of that, there was one credit note which was being issued because that goods was not in the perfect condition. So you returned that goods, and your supplier also raises a credit note of 20,000, right? You received an invoice of 1 lakh rupees and you also received a credit note of 20,000. So on a net, you are eligible to claim that ITC of 80,000. My question to all of you is very simple. How are you going to report this particular transaction in your GSTR 3B? Are you going to report under 4A5, which is talking about ITC available section, 1 lakh rupees, and under 4B2, you're going to show rupees 20,000? Or you are going to show a net figure of 80,000, which was an eligible ITCS per you, and I'm assuming that you have already received the goods and all, right? Or you are going to show the net figure of 80,000 under 4A5. How are you going to actually report this transition in your GSTR 3B? I could see there's an answer from Abhinav. Abhinav says 4A5 1 lakh rupees, and under 4B2 we are going to show 20,000 rupees. What about others? Sandesh also says the same thing. 4A5, the 1 lakh rupees, and the 4B2 is the 20,000 rupees. Right. So if you ask me today, right, most of most of the people actually show the same way, which is 4A5 is 1 lakh rupees and under 4B2, which is 20,000 rupees. So ultimately, when you talk about what is the net ITC which you're going to claim, the net ITC remains the same, which is 80,000. So what is going to get in your electronic credit ledger is the 80,000 only. But how we are reporting it is a very important thing, and we always report as 4A5 1 lakh rupees and 4B2 as a 20,000, which is also a right way of reporting as of today. If you even say after this August changes, right, that is actually a correct way of reporting. So there is no problem there. But still, if you ask me today, right, when you now go to GSTR 9 form, let's also link the GSTR 9 form today. You said in GSTR 3B that in 4A5 you are going to show 1 lakh rupees and 4B2 you are going to show 20,000 rupees. But now let's go to that GSTR 9 form. So all of you would have remembered that there is something called table 8A in GSTR 9 form. So that 8A is nothing but that's an auto-populated value from your 2A or 2B which government shows you, which is not an editable thing. If you ask me in that table 8A, what is the value which government is showing today? So that there the government again show the net amount. So the government actually showing what is coming from your 2B. There the government shows 80,000 rupees, right? Then they try to compare that same value from that 8A. They try to compare this value in 8B. And when you look into that 8B, I know some, if you don't remember the table, it is now a little confusing for you that what was that values which was coming, but I will give you a brief that how exactly, and you may always go back and refer to that particular tables because it's again very relevant for you since you're going to even file your GST9 for FY 21-22, and we all know the time is already there, so we have to file that return. So you should understand that how that discrepancy will even impact over there, right? And we know that when the department raises the notice, most of the time they raises the notice after you file your GST9. So they always look into your GST9 form to even raise the notice. So there is always this forms too when they raise the notice, but they also look into GSTR-9 form for raising the notice. So why you will see a discrepancy over there and how you have to avoid that notice. And if you're not able to avoid it because there's a discrepancy, you should know how well you are able to communicate this to the department, how you are going to maintain that documentation well in advance, so that even if you're receiving that notices, you are in that position to reply them back with the proper answer, proper documentation, proper documents, and even reasoning that why there's a differences, and that's a genuine reason. Now we were talking about the table number 8A, where I said that the value gets populated from your 2A or 2B, and the value when that get populates is from your 2A and 2B. There you said there was an amount of 80,000, right? When we look into, there's also something called table 8B, and when you look into table number 8B, the government says this is nothing but whatever is coming in your 6B plus 6H of GSTR-9 form. Now when you go to that 6B, 6B talks about that ITC, whatever was coming in table number 4A of GSTR-3B, that amount has to be shown. Whatever is coming in 4A 5 of your GSTR-3B, that comes in your 6A. Because the reversal which you do goes and reflect in table number 7. Whatever the ITC reversal, whatever the value you do or put in 4B of GSTR-3B goes in table number 7 of GSTR-9. Right? So now what I was trying to say is that here, when you look into 8A of GSTR-9 form, you see a net figure of 80 rupees. Whenever you look into 8B of GSTR-9 form, because this gets reflected or gets auto-populated from your table number 6, and 6 only have 4A5 ka value. And 4A5 value, as you said, it is 1 lakh rupees and not 80,000 rupees. Because the 20,000 ka difference, you would have put that value under the ITC reversal, and that comes in table number 7. And when the department compares that, they never considered that value. So here, if you just see, and if I'm assuming that you have claimed whatever was coming in your 2B, still you will always see a discrepancy between 8A and 8B of GSTR-9 form. Ultimately, in 8C, there would be a difference there. So now you should always be in a position to explain the difference to the department that, hey, department, I understand that there is a difference between this, but this value I have already reversed in table number 7. So here, if you ask me today, can I avoid the notice between a difference between 3B and a 2B? Maybe from that August changes in the 3B, from that 3B, I can always do that. But if you look into the GSTR-9 form, you will never be able to avoid that. And you have to explain that discrepancy to the department. And there you should make sure that you maintain a proper documentation with you that why there's a difference. And this difference is because of the credit note, which has already been reversed in table number 7. There would be other differences too. There would be other reasons for differences also. But you have to always make a documentation that this is the reason why there's a discrepancy, right? In the same way, not only this, see, whenever we claim that ITC, let's say I have claimed some ITC, I have extra claimed ITC, and it was not an intention. It was just like by mistake, I have claimed an extra ITC. I realized that mistake maybe after 2-3 months, and then I also reversed that ITC. Now my question to all of you is, and this we would have seen, so here one important point you should understand that many times you would see that there has been a notice which has been issued, there's a huge demand which is actually there, but now question is, do you have to pay that actual demand or not? You have to analyze it very carefully, because many times department himself asks for a demand, but actually that demand does not even exist. I will give you another very fair example. There was a case when we received a notice, and again, the same reason. There's a discrepancies between 2B and the 3B. The department contended, obviously said that assessing officer that you have claimed extra ITC in your GSTR 3B. Right. So first way is obviously we try to resolve the reason why there is a differences and all, and let's assume that okay, we understood that there was an extra ITC which was claimed in 3B, because earlier we had this provisional ITC concept also, right, that 5% extra can be claimed or 10% or 20% depending on which year that 3B belongs to. So you have to again make sure that there was a lot of changes which had happened. Today, we are saying that from January 2022 onwards, whatever is coming in 2B, that is the only ITC I can claim. But maybe before that, there was also 5% extra provisional ITC I could have claimed. If I have claimed it, that time department cannot ask for the discrepancy, and if there is a discrepancy, we can always explain. Now, but the another reason is, what about the interest also? Let's assume, okay, I understand there is some ITC, I have extra claimed of 1 lakh rupees, I have to reverse that amount. Okay, let me reverse that amount also. Other than reversing that ITC, will department ask for the interest or not? So you maybe again reply on the chat box. Other than just reversing the ITC, will department ask for the interest payment or not? And if yes, then what would be the rate of interest on that? I could see answer from Manikanta. Manikanta says yes, there would be an interest. And Vipin says yes. If within the year reverse, the interest will be done. Vikas says yes. Vipin says 18%. Okay, Manikanta says 18%. Some people are saying 24%. So if you ask me whether you have to pay the interest, answer is obviously yes, you have to pay the interest. What would be the interest rate? Would be 18%. But again, one important point here. Do we always have to pay the interest? The answer would be no. See, maybe you would have shown something under 4A5 as a ITC amount, but that does not mean that in that case I am liable to pay the interest. Because there can also be a case that I have not even utilized that amount. Right? In that month, I have a lot of extra ITC which I have claimed. It is even sitting in my electronic credit ledger, but I have never utilized that amount to discharge my liability. So let's say my liability was let's say 5 lakh rupees. I claimed an ITC of 1 lakh rupees, right? In that case, whether interest will be levied, yes, because I would have utilized that ITC. But if it's a vice versa case, I had a liability of 1 lakh rupees, ITC was 5 lakh rupees, and out of that 5 lakh rupees, I have claimed extra 1 lakh rupees. Whether interest will be levied, answer would be no. No interest will be levied in that particular case, right? So here the another important part, whether you have utilized that or not, is a very important factor in determining interest. So whenever department, even if they're raising the notice, you just make sure for that interest amount, you have to pay interest only if it is even utilized. If it is not utilized, that ITC amount was never utilized, you have wrongly just shown in 3B, in that particular case, there is no question of interest there. So this is some another important point which we should understand, that when you are raising or whenever you're receiving the notice, you should know, okay, if there's a difference, actually there's a difference, is there a genuine reason or not? If there's a genuine reason, then you have to explain that to the department. But if there's actually a mistake, then obviously you have to pay the whatever the liability they're asking for. But there also you should make sure whether that interest part which they're asking for, the late fees part which they're asking for, is it even correct or not? Because many times that is also not correct, right? So this is the another important point which we should understand. Now, the other reason could be because of the GST refund also. Many times we have wrongly claimed the refund from the department. In that particular case, they can again raise the notice over there. There can be a cases where I failed to even obtain a registration. I had to take the registration, I have not taken the registration. In that particular case, they can raise the notice. Or maybe there is an inconsistency, and this is another very genuine case. But here there is a practical problem. And now I will talk about the practical problem which we always face. See, there can be an inconsistency in the reporting in GSTR-1 and the ICE gate department. So when we look into the export transaction, right? So in case of export transaction, we know in GSTR-3B there is a table called 3.1B where we show zero rated supply. GSTR-1 also we show zero rated supply, right? There is an obviously there is a separate section altogether over there. So whenever we have a zero rated supply, which means we have the export or maybe supply to an SEZ unit, in that particular case, if there is a discrepancy between GSTR-1 and a GSTR-3B, in that particular case, again, the department may raise the notice over there. So you should know that whenever there is an export transaction, you are correctly reporting in the correct section in GSTR-3B, because if you're not again doing that, then there's the high chances that you will receive a notice over there. Now, one another important reason could be because how or when we are even raising the invoice, or the rate of tax, is it correctly charged or not? I will give you another example. So it's not only about claiming ITC, it's not only about the liability part, whether we are paid or not. There can be other reasons also. You would have seen that the department keep on even reducing the GST rate or increasing the GST rate. And many times what we say is like, hey, okay, anyhow, the department has reduced the rate, but I have already charged a higher rate. I collected higher rate, I deposited higher rate, no notice to be issued. But see, you should also remember one thing, that there is a concept of anti-profiteering measure. So whenever we receive a like notification that there has been reduction in the GST rate, you also have to make sure that for that particular item, you also have to reduce that rate. You have to collect a lower amount from the customer and accordingly pay that to the government. Because if you're not doing that, then there also you will be receiving a notice, and there can be a huge penalty on that because of this anti profiting reason. And one simple example could be, if you would have remember, right, there was an Indian online gaming thing where there was a notice, there was a demand which has been issued for around 21,000 crore for this GST evasion. And I know I am not taking the name of that company, but you would know for this particular thing there was a 21,000 crore demand. And what they were even asking for, they were asking that this GST, the invoices that which they have issued was backdated, and this GST rate which they have applied was inaccurate, right? For that they had raised this demand. So this is some examples you would have seen, that where you are seeing, and not only this, you would have seen there was a lot of cases of fake invoices also. But actually it's not even a fake invoice. Many times can be a fake invoice, but sometimes it is not even a fake invoice. So there also you should see, you should be able to justify that, hey, that whatever the IT. So there was a condition where people saying, okay, it was coming in my GSTR-2B, there was no problem, I even made a proper payment and all. So but still it's very difficult for the department. You have to explain that to the department that, hey, I have a proper e-way bill, I received this goods, this is a proper GRN number, I also made the payment, it is even reflecting in 2B. So you should be in a condition to fulfill all the requirement which is actually mentioned in section number 16, right? So we should be in a way that we are able to make a proper documentation and reply to the department. Now the another thing is, the good part is actually you can reply online itself. So on the government portal itself there's a way where you can always reply. So you should be able to reply with the proper documentation to the department. And how we can ensure that there's a foolproof thing, that we don't receive the notice, and if we are receiving we are able to reply them. You should make a proper way how the things are even working in your company, right? A way could be, today if I am raising an invoice, if e-invoicing is applicable, whether I'm generating the IRN number or not, if e-way bill is required, whether I'm using the same document for generating that e-way bill or not, if there is an e-way bill, and even if there is a discrepancies between that, where the same document is going and reflecting in GSTR-1 or not, then from there the direct information is coming in 3B or not, whether RCM liability has been correctly reported in my GSTR, my in fact my books of accounts, and also whether there is a proper self invoice also. Because many times I will tell you few examples that many times people, they don't even raise, even they know that there's a reverse charge liability they have to be paying, they will directly report in 3B, but they will never create a self invoice there. So if you're purchasing from unregistered person and the transaction was liable to reverse charge, sometimes we actually pay the liability also, but we don't raise a self invoice. But you should remember that if department comes to you tomorrow, you should be in a position that you show that this is the self invoices which was issued, against which I have claimed the ITC in my GSTR-3B, because that is also another important requirement for claiming the ITC, right? So this is something which you should again understand when it comes to replying to the notices. This should not be like, okay, hey, I have already paid this, I have claimed it, I am done. There are other documents which you should have properly with you, proper invoice properly. And see, I will tell you, there are few things where we don't even think about it. Many times people do that backdated invoice also. But see, even if when you're doing a backdated invoice, are you looking into the series which you are maintaining? I have seen a cases where people have done, okay, INV 1 to INV 10 I have issued in the month of August, for example. From let's say INV 11 to 11, INV 15 I have raised in the next month. Right? I reported that also. And then I'm trying to do a backdated invoice for INV 16. Now you think in the September month, when you have already said I have done only till 15th, how can you even raise an invoice of INV 16 in my like the August month, right? You cannot do that. So something we should always keep in our mind, that what is the series which we are following while we are even reporting this invoice. So this is something which we should always keep in our mind. Try to have as many as document you can. Like if you are receiving the goods and the services, whether you have a proper GRN number or not, or you have a SRN number with you or not, whether the ITC is for the 2B which you are claiming, that's an eligible ITC. Are you making sure that not available ITC because of the place of supply or the time bar thing, you're not claiming that ITC. So you should also maintain that. How you're reporting in 3B is also a very important thing. And for that, I think we already have a separate session where I have explained about that 3B ka breakup, right? And you can always refer to that particular session where I talked about that. Now it's a very important thing that you should reconcile your ITCs for the 2B and the PR, and then accordingly you claim in 3B. And when you are claiming, make it a proper way. It's not like, okay, net ITC you are showing, or let's say there was some ITC coming in 2B, but you don't have to claim and you're ignoring that. You should not do that. You have to show that in 4A5 and 4B too. So this is something which you should always keep in your mind while you are even reporting certain ITC in your GST3B, or how you are even filing your GST return is a very important part over there. So, and these are some of the ways that you should always make sure you're doing proper scrutiny. You're always looking into each and every transaction properly. You're making sure that there's some ITC reversal. So you have done ITC reversal properly. What is the method you have done for the ITC reversal? Whether you have proper documentation trail for with you or not, all of that has to be done properly, right? And if you ask me now, how can ClearText help you with all this? So if there are already certain reports, there are already some tools which we have already enabled, where you can always keep a track of this health check report of a company. You can always look into the GST filing status. You can look into the 1 versus 3B versus books, or 3B versus 2B versus books, or there's a vendor compliance report. So all of these are already inbuilt in our ClearText product. So you can always make a use of this, and this will actually help in avoiding these notices. And even if you have received the notices, that will actually help you in making sure that you make a proper reply to the department, and you have a proper calculation trail, proper documentation with you. A very simple example: today we keep on saying that in 3B we are claiming some ITC, but that is just a one value. Let's say I've claimed 1,20,000, but that value corresponds to certain invoices. So there, if you're already using ClearText, you're already running a reconciliation between 2B and the 2B and the PR. There, the value which is coming in 3B will also make sure that what was the document behind it, so that tomorrow when the department comes with a notice, you will be able to respond them with a proper reply that, hey, these are the documents, and I know that this has been reconciled with this document, and accordingly I have claimed the ITC in my GSTR-3B. So you can always do that, right? So these are the list of certain reports like ITC. So not only helping the replying to the notices, there are also certain reports which helps you in the working capital management and all, where it makes sure that you also save on your taxes. Let's say if there is an ITC utilization report. When I'm saying ITC utilization, how the way we set off today. So in GSTR-3B, we know that IGST can be set off against the IGST, then IGST can be set off against CGST or SGST in any proportion, right? So there, how are we setting it off is very important, because there also you can save on your taxes. So that is some kind of a report where if you're not saving, we actually tell you that here you can actually save on the taxes. Similarly, there is some other kinds of report, which is credit accumulation report, the RCM available versus claim report, the ITC report, the filing tracker. So all of this report, you can always look into it. You can even run a lot of reconciliations which are already available in the clear text, and can make use of this so as to reply to the notices or avoid the notices. So something, obviously it tells you upfront so that you don't have to worry about the discrepancies while you are filing your returns. So these are some of the things which is already there, and now I will just look into the Q&A session. uh, so I know there are a lot of queries, so maybe I will just take a Q&A session over here. And still, in case I'm not able to respond or some of the queries are left, you can always feel free to mail me at gstsupport@cleartext.in or surbi@cleartext.in. So that's my mail ID. So you feel free to mail me at surbi@cleartext.in. And if you, I know some of you have also asked for the PPT, so anyhow you will be receiving this PPT after this session. But still, in case you don't receive it, you can always mail me at surbi@cleartext.in. So that's my mail ID. So I will always drop you, or I will just forward that PPT over there. So with this, we'll just take some queries which is been asked here. One question from Abhinav: why is government not changing logic of 8b plus 8b to 6b plus 6h minus 7? Abhinav, there is actually a reason why they're not changing, because if you look into table number 7, right, it is not only about the credit note. Rather, that also has certain ITC reversal because of rule number 42 and 43. So, if you ask me about 42 and 43, right, I am reversing that ITC because I am supplying both the exempted and taxable supply. But when you look into 2B, that ITC would always be there, right? So even if they change it, then also there can be a lot of discrepancies over there. So they don't want to change it. The best way is if they allow us to put a negative figure in 3B. So when they start allowing us to put a negative figures in 3B and allow us to put the net of figure in the 3B itself in the 4A5, automatically all this problem will be sorted. So that is how we have to look into it, but we just have to wait and watch that when the government come up with that change, and accordingly we'll use that. Another question is from Shravan, who is asking what is the due date for raising the invoice. So, Shravan, due date is like, see, if it is in respect of the movement of the goods, then it is obviously before at the time of that movement of goods, you have to raise that invoice. And if it is in respect of the services, then you have a time period of 30 days. So, within the 30 days from the time you are actually supplying, you can always raise that invoice. But now again, my question would be, if you are into that condition where invoicing is applicable, it's always suggested that you raise the invoice on the same time when you are giving that to the recipient, because that invoice itself will not be considered as a valid invoice unless it has the proper item and the QR code on top of that. Another question from Shravan, who is asking, commission to pay for 17, 18, 19, 20. Can I raise that invoice? Shravan, yes, you can do that. So, but again, you have to make sure, because obviously the time of supplies, for the time of supply, uh, if you have already supplied that, then it should have been raised that time itself, not now. But since you are saying maybe you have to, you will be getting payment also now, so you can always raise the invoice now itself. Another question I could see from Bala, who is asking, if we file GSTR-3B after due date, I am need to reverse that ITC away. No, Bala, even if you file the GSTR-3B after the due date, you don't have to reverse any ITC away. The problem would be only if there is some ITC which you're trying to claim for FY 21 22. And when you're trying to claim the GSTR like ITC in relation to FY 21-22 after 30th November, if you try to file after 30th November, right, you will never be allowed to claim any ITC which is related to FY 21-22. So that time you have to make sure that you're not claiming that ITC. So that's the only thing. But if you ask me about the normal thing, you don't have to reverse any ITC there. Another question is from Marcos, who's asking clause 44 on tax audit related to GST. How are we? So, Marcos, we are actually helping you provide a report in relation to the clause 44 on the tax audit. So, you can always download that report from ClearTest, and accordingly, you can fill the Form 3CD while you're filing for the tax audit. Another question is from that, I think from Kamal, who is asking, there's a discrepancy between the import of goods, which is reflected on the IceGate portal and what is coming in there 2B, and there's a discrepancy over there. So, Kamal, see, one thing I will tell you, even there's a discrepancy. First question is, can you claim the ITC in 3B? If you have received the goods and services, you have proper bill of entry and all, you can always claim the ITC in respect of the I would say import of goods, even if it is not coming in your GSTR 2B. But what is the ideal scenario? Obviously, we should make sure that there is no discrepancy. So there is a already utility on the government portal where you can fetch this information from the IceGate again. So I would suggest that make use of that utility and just fetch that missing information from there, and accordingly claim the ITC in your GST 3B also. Another question is from Vikas, who is asking how to reply for the GST ITC recon for the period July 2017 to October 2019, and there was no two-way reconciliation. Okay, so Vikas, there was no two-way reconciliation that time, but again, the thing is, you have to again you have to just quote that provisions, right? That there was a like whatever the ITC, whether you have a proper purchase documents with you or not. So if you have a proper purchase document, you're able to give them that this are the document details and all. Accordingly, you can reply this to the department. Another question I could see from Shivyogi, who's asking, if I claim ITC November 13 and file GST return in December 3B, it's okay. Shivayogi, if you are trying to claim that ITC in respect of November return period, which is November 2022, and filing maybe on 30th of December, that is okay. There is no problem there. But if you are saying that you are trying to claim that the ITC which is related to FY 21-22, and you are filing that return on 20th November, then that's not okay. So it again depends on for which return period or for which period you are trying to claim that ITC. Right. So hope I had covered your most of the queries. I know there were few more queries which is there, but I don't know, it's jumping up. All right. So even if I have missed some of the queries, I would just say you can always mail me at surbi@cleartext.in. So that's my mail ID. So I will happy to reply any of the answer to your queries. And even if you need the PPT, if in case you don't receive it, so you can always mail me at surbi@cleartext.in. So I will just share that PPT with you over there. Right. So with this, thank you very much. Thank you for attending the session. And I know. Okay. So Shiva Yogi is asking for if I can clarify on RCM self invoice. So Shiva Yogi, RCM self invoice is nothing but whenever you purchase from that unregistered person, and if the transaction is covered under reverse charge. So when I'm saying the transaction is covered under reverse charge, like for example, there were some advocate services and that advocate is not registered, right? So in respect of the legal services which you have availed from that advocate, in that particular case, because that advocate is unregistered and the transaction is covered under reverse charge, you are required to raise a self invoice. So you have to raise invoice on your own name, and accordingly you can claim the ITC basis that particular invoice. Another question from Mahalakshmi is asking any changes in HSN summary disclosure while filing GSTR-1. Yeah, Mahalakshmi, now the government has just mandated to have your HSN summary. And in GSTR-1, you have to code that 6-digit or 4-digit depending on your turnover. So that is what they have also mandated on the government portal. So that is the only change. Other than that, there is no change. All right. Well, thank you very much. And if I have and okay, I think Shiv Yogi is asking what about HSN summaries ITC. So Shiv Yogi, I think you're asking about GSTR-9. Maybe we do have a section right for that HSN summary, invert HSN summary. So you're not required to. That is still optional in nature. So it's on you if you want to report it or not. But that's optional in nature. But when it comes to outward supply in GSTR-9, you have to mandatorily like report that. So when it comes to inward HSN summary, you don't have to anywhere report in GST1 because GST1 only talk about the outward HSN summary. So GST9 may inward HSN summary is optional in nature. Another question from Kamal who is asking if my turnover crossed 10 crore in October 2021, then when I need to raise, you have to start it from April 2023 onwards. So if it is crossed in the October 2022 itself, in that particular case, it always starts from the start of the next financial year. So you have to create the invoicing from 1st April 2023 onwards. Right. So thank you very much. Thank you for joining, and hope you have also filled this feedback form. So this will help us in actually knowing more about the topics you are interested in, and accordingly we can always like take the sessions on the topic in which you are interested in, and feel free to give the feedback. And thank you very much. Thank you for joining the session.